Elon Musk buys Twitter. We're going to talk about it. There's a lot of ramifications, even with Disney. We're going to talk about it up next. Welcome aboard to another episode of the Orange Nerd Show. Here on the Orange Nerd Show, we talk about everything except the theme parks. We're talking about the corporate end of Disney. We're talking about Hollywood, movies, film, Star Wars, Marvel, all that good stuff. And I brought my colleague, my friend, my brother, producer Dre, to dive into this incredible story about Elon Musk buying Twitter. Dre, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, yeah, happy to be here. This is quite the interesting turn of events with this particular company, right? And following the story this whole entire time, even I was like, 50-50 on whether or not this was actually going to happen. But Elon Musk seemed committed, and here's why we are here today. So to get things started, you can follow me right there at VashSky on Twitter. Right? Yeah, exactly. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now, OrangeGo55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info, squeezed fresh, right from the Grove. There we go. Scan my magic band in here. We're in. Let's do it.
We're in. Okay, so crazy news dropped yesterday. Elon Musk bought Twitter.
Yeah.
The Twitter board agreed. They're going to sell themselves to Elon Musk. And there's a lot. This is huge, you guys. This is massive, massive news. It changes so much. So much. But I'm going to start off with you, Dre. When you heard this news, what were your first kind of thoughts on this? Like, what was kind of going through your head?
I was particularly impressed how Elon Musk had had done all this, to be quite honest. A lot of people said that it wouldn't happen, or it wouldn't work, or there were some legal hurdles that had to be overcome, and all kinds of things. But really, I mean, I think Elon, you have to give him credit. No matter what you think of him, you have to at least give him credit that he was able to essentially buy out the entire company outright and from underneath even the board itself. Now, obviously, the board, came to an agreement with Elon, but you saw it initially where he puts up the $43 billion offer, right? And you could obviously sense the board's hesitation to that. But even going back, I mean, he was able to acquire, I think, over like 9% of shares within a time period which you have to regularly, usually disclose that information, because if somebody like Elon were to take an ownership stake that high, that could potentially, right, if he reported that, the stock could take a bounce. That's why they have that legal requirement for reporting in place. But so the board tried to put him on the board. Which presumably tried to keep him from acquiring more than 14.9%. And obviously, Elon wasn't he wasn't too satisfied by that. Obviously, he was committed to implement many more changes than what he could as a shareholder at that level. And he decided to buy it outright. And the board did fight back. Obviously, they put out the poison pill out there. But Elon Musk, to his credit, countered with a kind of a tender offer and secured the funding, which was a huge hurdle. And and now we're here, and it's man, that's quite amazing.
It is. It's really incredible. I mean, this is more than just a typical acquisition. Things, media companies and social media companies and apps and tech companies, they get bought and sold all the time. They merge with other companies and what have you. And while that is big news, no doubt, Twitter is different though. Twitter has so much cultural relevance. It kind of not only follows trends in culture, it even kind of trailblazes those trends.
Yes.
A lot of stuff starts at Twitter. and things like cancel culture. I mean, Twitter is really the nucleus of like even like cancel culture. People get canceled all over the place on TikTok and Instagram and what have you, but Twitter is really the bulk of where that occurs.
Right.
And Elon Musk ended up buying this company with so much cultural power. That's something. That's a major thing. That's a major play on Musk's his part.
Absolutely. It's really a bigger deal than I think a lot of people might initially suspect. Now, obviously, I think people's initial reaction, if you have any experience with the kind of the online field, you understand to some degree just how monumental this actually is. But like you said, OG, this is the kind of trailblazing cultural influence that we've had, that has affected all of our lives in one or more ways. For I mean, probably ever since they went public in 2013. I mean, it has really been quite the force of cultural relevance to speak of. But just to give you an idea of how big this actually is, when a certain 45th president of the United States was banned on Twitter, right? I mean, you had, people like Angela Merkel of Germany, the prime minister there, saying, "Whoa, maybe, I mean, this is quite a bit of power that has been extended towards Twitter and towards these social media companies." Now, obviously, the EU is pushing back on Elon Musk and what he wants to do with the actual company itself. But I mean, this is how this stuff gets really big. I believe you'll remember there was a large scale hack that happened, and it was kind of like a Bitcoin scheme, right? So you had Barack Obama's Twitter account. I believe it was Elon Musk as well, Bill Gates, and a couple of other high-profile notable figures offering, "Hey, donate in Bitcoin. I'll get you more back," or something like that. And it was a pretty interesting hack that kind of shocked a lot of people. And it was like, wow, if something happens on Twitter like this, you could start a war, a major international conflict. I mean, that's just how big the cultural influence is. We saw there was one high-profile story about the AP and how it was hacked and said that something had happened to the White House or something, and people were making the argument then because people were really freaked out over that. This was a high-profile media organization, suggesting a kind of terrorist attack. So this has Twitter has huge ramifications to the entire culture at large, and it's fascinating how this has all worked out.
It is. I mean, look, you mentioned the last president, President Trump. I mean, a lot of the support that he had, and a lot of his opponents who vehemently opposed him, a lot of that, the love and the hate, stemmed from what he did on Twitter. I mean, it held a lot of relevance in that political sphere in regards to him.
Yes.
And like you said, it has ramifications. What the president tweets has global ramifications. Even things like on the corporate side of things, like if you have a CEO of a company who's tweeting things out, that can affect the stock price quite
absolutely.
Dramatically. So there's a huge amount of influence here with this buy. Now, we don't really know what Musk is going to end up doing with Twitter, if it's going to be just kind of like maybe tweaking the terms of service, maybe giving us an edit button, stuff like that, just trying to make it better. Who knows? We haven't really heard anything. It's far too soon for any of that. But the impact is huge. Culturally, this is huge. Massive.
I believe Elon has specifically pointed out that one of the big things he wants to do is actually adjust the algorithm and actually make it open source, which would be a huge game changer because that algorithm is very manipulative. Now, I do want to get like a whole section can be done on the algorithm, and I do want to get to it. But you mentioned how tweets have a huge cultural impact, especially from somebody like the president. Well, as you'll know, President 46 Joe Biden, he was the one that kind of got the whole Rudy Creek situation started with Disney.
Right.
That's how much influence and power, something like that has. It was Joe Biden's tweet that was retweeted by Bob Iger, and showing his support and kind of putting the onus on Disney that they speak out publicly about HB 1557 out there in Florida, and that's what kind of got the ball rolling on this whole thing, which is culminating in what we've seen last week with the signing of the bill dissolving Reedy Creek Improvement District. So this is kind of how this effect actually happens. But this algorithm here, making it public, that's probably one of the biggest developments and one of the biggest things that Elon Musk has prioritized here.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct about how the influence. Because look, like you mentioned, with Joe Biden's tweet, and then Bob Iger, I think it was a quote he quote retweeted him or whatever,
right?
And that's, like you said, that cascaded down, and this whole Reedy Creek thing really started with that, right? Yep. And you can even go back a few years. The Twitter sort of set this kind of tone during the summer of 2020. That sort of spawned Disney to retheme Splash Mountain. I would argue that without Twitter and kind of the conversations happening on Twitter at that time, Disney wouldn't have felt the pressure to sort of address this theme for Splash Mountain. It wouldn't have even have happened. It wouldn't have been announced, right? I'd even go as far as to say a lot of the moves by Disney in terms of like Fifth Key, inclusiveness, all that stuff, it stems from Twitter. This is kind of like the public square that all this stuff sort of comes from.
It is.
And it affects Disney greatly, greatly. Chapek's reputation preceded him mostly because of what park fans were tweeting about him in 2015, 2016, 2017. That's why he had the reputation, because of what people were tweeting about. So it's massive impact on Disney. This could change where Twitter goes, and where that conversation from Twitter goes could really impact where Disney goes, especially with a CEO like Bob Chapek, who is very data driven, he's very focused on what is the public talking about, what the public wants. So if you're a Disney fan, you should be watching the Twitter story very closely, because Twitter has affected Disney greatly in the past. And it could affect them going forward. And with Musk now owning it, the game has changed.
Yes, and it's fascinating. These two organizations, while not directly linked to each other, have had an impact on each other. You'll know that I believe it was around the early 2010s. I think Bob Iger himself was actually circling the tires on actually buying Twitter outright, and folding that into the kind of Disney's portfolio, and at the very end, he just said it might not be worth it, because once you get into that sphere, once you get into that space, the type of changes that Disney might implement as on that platform could have huge ramifications to not just Disney, but to the kind of the public square, as you put it, OG, and that could put Disney in kind of the crosshairs from the likes of which might not be beneficial towards the company, and then that's really what it is. You talk about Splash Mountain, you talk about all these different things. It's fascinating because and a lot of that has to do with the algorithm that we spoke about earlier. I think Twitter, I think the thing that kind of undergirds the whole thing is, as you kind of interact on the platform, right? Let's say you like a tweet here, you retweet something here. That algorithm is constantly examining what you do and attempting to fold in content that it believes that you might disproportionately favor, right? That you might like to see. And what happens when that occurs is some content gets dropped off. Well, you can kind of imagine how this can kind of insulate you from the wider conversations actually taking place. and give you maybe a false impression of what's actually going on. This is kind of one of the downsides of this algorithm not being transparent in how it functions, how it works, because there's limited control in how that occurs, right? And I think that's what kind of tripped Disney up, especially in these most recent years. I think Disney, you have a lot of corporate executives, a lot of people who have influential power at the company, may have gotten sucked into that insulation. It may have got sucked into that kind of that groupthink or that echo chamber that is invisibly constructed around you, and maybe alter what maybe the alter your perception on what the public perception actually is, right? And that's why I brought up the polling when I did, just to kind of demonstrate with data, hey, some of these ideas that were circling around the company and so forth weren't necessarily popular, and how might you conceive be convinced of that? Well, it's from algorithms like Twitter. It's kind of going off of what is maybe directly in your feed and not actually public sentiment. So it's a crucial aspect of this whole thing.
Yeah, no, on a personal level, I've experienced that. Back when Occupy Wall Street was like a thing, long, many moons ago.
Sure.
I supported the movement. I thought that was a time. It came right after like the housing market collapse. I think it was like in 2009-ish. And there was this big push in like 2011 to kind of rein in Wall Street, right?
Yes.
And I thought that was good. I thought that, give more power to, the worker, and I supported the movement, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing with the movement. It was really strong for like a month, right? But then it started to die pretty quick. But if you were on Twitter, you wouldn't know that, because if you're following a bunch of like Occupy accounts, it seems like there's like all this activity and the movement's alive and well. I mean, even for years after the initial birth of the movement, even into like 2012, 2013, what have you, right? But it was kind of like what you mentioned and what you touched upon, Dre. It was kind of like an illusion. It was an echo chamber. It's like the same like 14 people kind of feeding off each other, and it gives this illusion of casting this major shadow that it really isn't casting. I would read the articles like in Politico and things like that, say, Occupy is dead, yeah. And I had a hard time kind of reconciling that. Like, how is it dead? I'm seeing so much activity on Twitter. Well, it's dead because Twitter's the echo chamber, and it's really easy to get sucked into that bubble and kind of lose grasp of kind of like the reality of the situation. It happens on a small scale, like a personal level, like for me, or on a bigger scale,
Yeah, and you have this kind of false sense of momentum with your specific example that it's kind of like, wow, how are these people saying something so radically different from what I'm experiencing, or what experiences being maybe necessarily fed to you, and your assessment on that whole thing. Now take it even one step further, right? What if you acted upon that and donated towards certain activists in that space, falsely believing that this Occupy Wall Street movement had momentum, right? And that's where your decision making, your assessment of the situation is so crucial, right? In order to prevent you from maybe making mistakes that you otherwise wouldn't have made. And that's why it was so frustrating to see Disney's public statements and how it was so haphazardly done, was because it was clear to anybody who actually examined the data on the ground, anybody who had a kind of a finger on the pulse, if you will, of the public sentiment, in Florida, surrounding the country, and so forth, that what they were doing was not going to be particularly popular, and that would necessarily open up the company to attack, right? That would leave them vulnerable in that way. And that's why it's kind of really important to not, obviously have your social media platforms, that's fine, but when you have this kind of almost false representation of reality surrounding you, it's really important to kind of get outside that bubble and really kind of try to get an accurate finger on the pulse through various methods, not just with Twitter, but through other means. But you can see kind of the power that this company actually has,
Right.
and how this kind of these momentum shifts and so forth can change things.
No, 100%, 100%. And I try to step out because look, I'm like neck deep in this Disney world. We got a YouTube channel. We're talking about this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
It's very easy to get stuck in that bubble. And that's why I try to make it a point to really talk to people that are not friends, coworkers that are not really in that sphere, kind of get their opinion. I'll constantly ask coworkers, hey, what do you think about Genie Plus?
Right.
What do you think about the reservation system? Stuff like that. Because I think it's important to kind of step out of that because, like, look, Diz Twitter will have you believing that this stuff is it's on everyone's mind. Oh my God, reservations, Genie Plus, this, that, and the other. And in reality, maybe the general public doesn't necessarily feel that way. And I've noticed there has been a gap. It's all part of that bubble. And it's very easy to get stuck in that echo chamber and think like, wow, even Wall Street, like, look, we're in this space. We've been talking a lot about Reedy Creek, right? Wall Street didn't really give a shit about Reedy Creek, but like in our little fandom bubble, Reedy Creek is the talk of the town. It's all of us are really even talking about right now.
Yeah.
Wall Street didn't even blink an eyelash with Reedy Creek. It was the Netflix numbers that really made the stock tank, right?
Right.
It's like that. It's just so easy to get like kind of stuck in your own world where you start to believe this stuff. And Twitter is a huge factor in all of that. You can kind of tailor craft your reality, right? It's kind of like, oh, I'm going to follow these people. I'm going to block these people. And then before you know it, you're kind of living in your own little world, and it might not even be true to what's really going on.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. 100%. And some of that is obviously, user driven, right? But a lot of it is just, hey, you know what? I like this tweet, or, retweet this, and, like that. And you know what? Maybe I mute that person. And after a while, whether it be your actions or the algorithm itself, like you said, you've constructed this kind of echo chamber that kind of insulates you from the larger picture going on, and can kind of lead you astray. Some people, I mean, we have a very Diz Twitter can have a very passionate base, right? That is very not bashful in offering up their opinions, right? And so it's like, to give you an example, Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. There's some contingent in Diz Twitter that doesn't quite enjoy Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. And if you were just going by Twitter, you'd think, wow, nobody really nobody likes this attraction. It has all these problems, has all these flaws, whatever. But you get out to the general public, and that's completely the opposite. It's one of the highest, guest satisfiers in all of Disney California Adventure, and many of the parks actually worldwide. If you actually rank all the attractions and combine them, it's a very, very high performer. It's unbelievably popular. It's probably popular to the point where it books many vacation packages just on its own. I mean, but you would never know that if you were just isolated in the kind of bubble that you've either constructed for yourself or has been constructed around you. So it's kind of a fascinating kind of thing here, how they, through those methods, your perception can be twisted and altered in a way that may not be consistent with reality.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question, Dre, because I think this is actually an interesting kind of thing to dive into.
Sure.
Because Twitter is really like I mentioned earlier, Twitter really is like the kind of nucleus, the heart and soul of like this whole cancel culture thing, right?
Yeah.
That's where it really all comes from, is Twitter.
Now it definitely has its tendrils interlocked with it for sure. For
sure. And it kind of fuels this whole thing. Now with Musk buying Twitter, right, and potentially, we don't know what his plans are. So this is all speculation. We're kind of spitballing here, just having a conversation. But like,
sure,
just for everyone at home, sometimes people think like it's a definitive thing. we're not saying anything definitive. We're just
No.
kind of speculating right now, you know?
Yeah.
But because of the potential changes that are coming to Twitter with Musk owning the company now,
Right.
does that change the dynamic in terms of our culture, of cancel culture, of how as a society we sort of move forward? Because it wouldn't take too much for Elon to sort of change the terms of service and tweak things here and tweak things there. And before you know it, cancel culture is sort of less effective. Do you think that's a possibility? Is that something am I just kind of like totally crazy? Like, where are you kind of at with that?
Well, it's interesting. It depends on how you define cancel culture, right? So is cancel culture just limited to the social media space, or is it more broad in its kind of socioeconomic ramifications, like with jobs and so forth, roles and all that? It's quite fascinating how you bring this up because according to information out there, now obviously this is a developing story. There might be more meat applied to these bones as we go along. This story may change, but the story currently is Elon Musk was inspired to buy Twitter in the first place because there was a high-profile banning or suspension. I'm trying to figure out which one, but there was a high-profile suspension of one of the accounts that he liked personally. It was the satire outlet known as the Babylon Bee. They were, yeah, I know, it's wild, right? I guess they had him as an interview on, I believe their podcast or their show or something, and he, took a liking to them. Obviously, he had read their stuff before, but he had taken very much a liking to them after that show and experience, right? Well, a couple months later, Babylon Bee gets suspended off of Twitter, and that's what that's why Elon was inspired to actually buy it outright, because I think he understood that, well, wait a minute, if you start banning some of these kind of dissenting or contrarian voices, then that will have a broad impact on culture. And that was one of his big motivating factors to even buy it out in the first place. So this kind of cancel culture dynamic that you're talking about here is intrinsically linked to this whole effort by Elon Musk. This is what inspired this whole thing. So this is very much at the forefront of Elon Musk himself. But also when you take a kind of a wider view of this, absolutely, Twitter is definitely this. It provides a tool by the people who want to see bad things happen to people actually take place and occur. I mean, that's just the bottom line here. Now, whether that's in the form of cancel culture or otherwise, I mean, that is really, it's really at the heart of this whole thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. Look, cancel culture has kind of always existed to some degree, right?
Sure. Oh, yes.
I remember, and this is really aging me like crazy, but I forgot the actor's name. Maybe you know, but the actor who plays Pee Wee Herman.
Yes.
I forgot his name off the top of my head, but you guys know who Pee Wee Herman is, right?
We know who Pee Wee Herman is. Let's get it right now.
Let's go ahead. Yeah, go ahead and get the actor's name.
Paul Rubens.
Paul Rubin, who's also the voice of this little guy right
That's
here.
Right. Yeah, Rex. Oh man.
So Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubin,
yes,
years ago, was caught doing something not so good, not so wholesome in a movie theater. Right.
Yes.
I'm not going to get into it on here, but just to give you an idea, was it just not appropriate in a movie theater?
Yes.
And he was blacklisted in Hollywood. He didn't work for years after that, right? Yeah. Now, this was long before social media, long before Twitter. So in a sense, that was kind of a form of cancel culture, right?
Yes.
This has kind of always happened, but now it's a lot more. Now anyone can really cancel anybody with Twitter and things like that. I mean,
unfortunately,
I don't like what your opinion is. I'm gonna smear you. I'm gonna drag you through the mud. I'm gonna try to get you fired. I'm gonna all this horrible stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it's just much more readily available. It's always kind of existed, but now it's like on steroids. Right?
Oh yes. and those same media outlets who, ended up causing the cancellation of Paul Rubens, their tactics had kind of switched towards using Twitter to those kind of destructive ends, and it's really kind of fascinating to see that kind of take place. And from what I understand, Elon Musk is not all that fond of that. Now, how he's going to provide for kind of safeguarding that, so to speak, that's going to be quite interesting. But let's put it out there. Twitter has been a gatekeeper for much of this kind of contrarian viewpoint, and that has resulted in cancellations. It's really kind of an unfortunate thing. Another dynamic playing out here, to bring it back to Disney just for 1 second, I just was reminded of this, and I felt appropriate to bring it up. I don't know if anybody's been watching this Johnny Depp trial. Yes. Obviously, it's kind of celebrity, kind of Hollywood driven, right? It's kind of this kind of almost tabloid type story, right?
Totally.
But Johnny Depp's testimony is quite profound, quite interesting, and he talks about how he really felt betrayed by Disney in that they kind of they kind of gave him a guilty verdict, so to speak, before he could even have his public day in court, before he could actually defend himself, and before he could actually kind of explain himself to the various people at Disney. But a lot of that was motivated by kind of the Twitter mob, so to speak, going after him. And there was really nothing that he could do, especially when you had corporations like Disney, drop their support for him. It kind of, this kind of snowballed into solidifying in people's mind that, Johnny Depp was absolutely guilty of what he was being accused of at the time, and so forth. And as this trial has developed, it's really kind of interesting, because you've had a lot of people go, maybe it was a mistake that we prejudged this incident. It's far more complex than maybe we originally gave it credit for. And it's one of those things. I mean, when you have these kind of bite-sized morsels of information going out, you could do some real damage to innocent people.
You can, and the Johnny Depp thing completely kind of falls under this cancel first, ask questions later kind of mentality,
Mm-hmm.
And it's dangerous. It's dangerous. And look, people get into this kind of mindset of well, I don't like that guy, or I don't like her, or whoever. I don't like that company. So yeah, go ahead and cancel them. I don't care. Right. The danger for that, though, and I seriously, the danger for that, if you're a progressive and you see these companies canceling conservatives, or if you're a conservative and you see these companies canceling progressives, it's a slippery slope, because look, you might not like the person getting canceled or the company that's getting canceled, but you have to understand something. If they're willing to do it to the other side, they're willing to do it to your side eventually. Yeah. So just be
absolutely
of that, and that's kind of my whole argument with the Reedy Creek thing too, is a little bit if he's willing to do it to Disney, he's willing to do it to, and even Newsom, now you set a precedent. So now Newsom can kind of start punishing conservative. It's just a slippery slope. I just think that we kind of have to kind of stand up for everybody. Now, look, if someone is doing really horrific things, cancel them. But we have to know that they really are doing those things. We can't cancel first and then figure it out later. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, and many of these issues are shaped by, like we said before, our perception on reality, right, and how it's been affected by outside influences and so forth. So it's a lot of these issues end up being far more complex than we originally gave them credit for. Actually, I'll do a little promo spot here. I am currently working on a very deep dive into the Reedy Creek Improvement District and its kind of surrounding issues. There's been some takes on there that online that have been questionable, and if you allow me, I'll set the record straight. But in time, hopefully, I get this video out this week. The work schedule is, it is what it is. But getting back to this though, I mean, public perception on some of these very complex issues can be very much skewed, and that's why, like we said before, it's really important to kind of take a holistic view of some of these issues before actually determining judgment. But no, I mean, Elon is from what he said, I mean, he is really wanting to restore free speech back to the platform, and it's interesting because Jack Dorsey once talked about Twitter as being the free speech wing of the free speech party kind of thing. This kind of free speech haven, if you will, and what we've seen, post 2016, maybe it hasn't always worked out that way, and now you have Jack Dorsey going on Twitter itself and kind of almost regretting openly some of the decisions that were actually made, and actually applauding Elon that he's actually doing this, and how he's so committed to bringing back the original vision of Twitter. In a way, it's quite a fascinating dynamic. It's really interesting.
I gotta give Dorsey some respect on that, and it kind of touches upon what I was kind of just talking about a few minutes ago.
Right.
Politically, Dorsey and Musk are not on the same page. Let's just say that they're not on the same page politically. You know what I'm saying? Yes. Yet Dorsey's out there saying, you know what? I support Musk.
Yes.
I think we need to have more free speech. We need to do this. I respect that of Dorsey because Dorsey does not agree with Musk on a lot.
No.
And he's still advocating for him. And I think we need more of that in this world in general, where look, I don't agree with this person, but I'm going to defend their right to say it. Right. I'm going to defend their right to say it. Obviously, look, there's limitations to that. I understand that, like legally and stuff. Like you don't want to. Not everything is going to be protected, okay? But I mean, I'm talking about like benign, like sort of opinions. I mean, I think these sort of like these harmless opinions you should be able to say something. And I respect the fact that Dorsey is defending Musk, even though they don't agree. I think that's where we should be at. In this world, I think we need to see more of that. We just don't see enough of that, man. It's like everyone is so in their own camp, and anything that the other side does, they're evil. And anything, it's horrible. It's ugly. And I really hope that with this whole thing, with Musk buying Twitter, that whole landscape changes. I'm sick of it,
Oh, I know. I mean, it's it's quite interesting how it's all developed. How it's all developed from the very start. I mean, Jack Dorsey he originally started Twitter with the intention of preserving a kind of a greater free speech than definitely what we experience today in this kind of very kind of corporatized internet social media presence as it's developed. It's been quite fascinating. I've heard congressional testimony from Jack Dorsey and some of the other social media, CEOs and leaders and so forth. And Jack was always one that obviously he's a bit eccentric, to put it lightly. But it did kind of seem that he at least tried to reasonably stick to his foundational principles, and obviously that becomes much harder when you have a public company with many shareholders, with many you have fiduciary duty, which is, by the way, might have been one of the reasons why the board capitulated the way they did, because they were facing some very what should I say, detrimental legal liabilities. So they had to obviously change course fast, which is why this all happened the way it did. They have fiduciary duty shareholders and so forth. But it's funny how it's developed, because Elon Musk has become almost this iconoclastic figure. This person who is so contrarian, who is going against the grain in kind of these foundational principles that we've kind of built our the social media world around. And honestly, it's when you look at even the foundation of this country, for example, free speech was tenement. I mean, it's why it's the First Amendment. to the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, right? It was a foundational principle, and this goes back to the works of Thomas Paine and so forth, and how the entire revolutionary event occurred, right? It's free speech is going to be a messy process, and even when you talk to Elon Musk, he doesn't have all the answers.
Right.
He's been questioned about how are you going to take blocking people, for example. Are you going to have everybody come back on? Apparently he is, apparently you can attempt to sign into your maybe blocked or deleted account and attempt to go through that process, and apparently he's going to let everybody back on.
Wow.
And that includes some notable figures, 45 and otherwise, right? And it's kind of an interesting thing how they're going to end up navigating these waters, but free speech, I understand I mean, hey, look, we're on YouTube. It's kind of a big deal for us. It affects us directly, and the way this kind of conversation is going, it's kind of a fascinating thing to watch.
It is. But one of the most important accounts that was actually recently reactivated after being banned, the most important, most influential accounts in this country, a national treasure, is the Drunk at Disney account.
You know what?
I love that man.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. he is some great stuff. He's very, very funny. Yeah. But no, look, I mean, listen, I would say, as long as you're not, I have my own personal views on it, I guess, but everybody deserves a fair shake at least, right? So let's, people are kind of worried about the prospect of some of these, figures, these controversial figures coming back on the platform. But let's kind of see before, judging too sharply, so to speak. It's interesting. I'll mention this because this is kind of a deal, and there's some going back and forth on this. One of the biggest controversial or potentially controversial moves is potentially letting the 45th president of the United States, Donald Trump, back on the platform, right? And some people are debating on whether or not that's actually going to occur. Now, from what I understand, looking into this for this story today, I guess Trump has said that he's not going to go back on the platform. I believe that's because of some legal liabilities that he has. I believe he has an exclusivity deal with his True Social media company that he's partnered with. So I wouldn't get too absorbed in that if depending on where you're at on that issue. But I felt it was important to bring up.
Well, no, I think both sides will get very absorbed in that, but for different reasons.
yes, exactly, right? Exactly. Oh, boy, I'm so glad we did this show. This is great. We're not going to get any feedback whatsoever. This is awesome.
No, not at all. But I want to thank you, Dre, for coming on as always, man. And I'm really looking forward to that video, that freshly squeezed Reedy Creek thing.
I'm looking forward to do it too, actually. There's been so much information, both good and bad, that is worth wading through, and I can't wait to do it myself, actually.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be fantastic, and stay tuned for that, everybody at home. And I want to thank you all so much for watching, everybody. This is a very interesting time we live in. Look, it's good to come together, different opposing viewpoints, and sort of like really just have conversations, right? Twitter is the antithesis of that.
yes
It is absolutely let's be honest, Twitter is like this horrible I don't even know, like this dystopian Tron thing. It's like this cyber reality, right?
Yeah,
we got to get back to just conversations. I think a lot of us have more in common than not. Even as Disney fans, we might disagree on a lot of things, but at the end of the day, we all love Disney, right? We all love the parks. We might disagree on a lot of stuff, but we all, at the core, we agree on a lot. So let's keep that in mind with our fellow human beings. As Dave from Fresh Baked always says, be kind to one another, right?
Right.
Be kind. You know, even if they disagree, be kind. But I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to thank producer Dre for joining me today. But Dre, if you can go ahead and let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Well, you can find me on such platform, that is Twitter, for the very robust discussions. That's going to be right down there at Vashguy, just like it's spelled. And if you want to see me, well, see, there you go, the robust marker right there. If you want to see me for some robust content, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now, Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove. You know who's really happy about this happening with Twitter?
Apologize for not being the ally that you needed me to be.
It's going to be Bob Chapek. He is absolutely on board with this whole idea.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Oh, man. Hopefully it takes a little bit of the heat away from him.
I think it might. I still think, and I might be crazy here, but I still think he has some sort of like, I don't want to say sock puppet account, but some sort of like secret like Twitter account that we like nobody knows about.
Hey, I think it might. I think he might.
Probably does. He probably does. It's pretty funny. But I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to thank you, Dre, for coming on. Comment down below with everything. I know you guys have takes on this. So comment down below with your opinion. We'd love to hear all viewpoints. You know, just be civil. That's all we ask.
Absolutely.
And share the video. We get a lot of shares from like Theme Park Casual. Love you, Casual. And Mr. Matthew Murr, we love you, Matthew. You know, we get a lot of shares, and that helps out the channel, and we do appreciate it. It does not go unnoticed. But I want to thank everyone for watching, and as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day.